Happy Tuesday. What day is it? Thursday, everybody. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to get logged in here. We had quite a few people sign up for the webinar, so I'm sure they're grabbing their lunch, using the restroom, and tuning in. So we'll start in about 2 minutes and get started talking about a recession and what the possibilities of that look like. So let's give you a couple minutes here and then we'll get started. Welcome, Carrie. Welcome, Eric. We're just allowing a few minutes for people to pop into the Zoom before we get started. Welcome, Christy. We haven't started yet. We're letting people get logged into Zoom so that we have quite a few that are signed up. So we just want to give a minute for that, get people settled, and then we'll pop into our conversation for today. One more minute. Welcome, James. Okay. Thank you, Drew, for letting me know that I am muted. So here we go again. I was just saying most of the time that we're going to wait a few minutes to let everybody pop into the meeting itself. So here we go. Thank you for taking some time for over your lunch hour to work on this and to talk about something that matters to all business owners. If we're small, we need to prepare in different ways than big business, but big business needs to prepare for this as well. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, so I won't be predicting whether or not this recession that people keep talking about is going to happen or not. I am just going to do my best based on the history and the research that I've done to transition some information so that you can maybe ask the right questions, prepare in a way that makes sense to you. So let's get started. So disclaimer, I'm going to use examples. I'm going to talk about things. Everybody's situation is different. So this isn't channeled to be exactly what you need for your business. This is more high level. What are the things you should consider? What does a recession actually mean? And some of those things. So we have to disclaimer that. Example disclaimers too. Individual results may vary. So who am I and what is Light Consulting? So I'm Sarah West. I'm the founder and owner of Light Consulting. I've been in this business. I've been in the finance business for 20 years now, but running my own business for 3 years. And what we want to do is we want to come alongside business owners and make business light. Now that can look different for most business owners. The heaviest thing that we usually deal with is finance, and money can just be emotional and hard to understand the complexity of taxation and financing and all of the things that go along with that. So that's where we spend the bulk of our time, is working with companies on their finance things. We also do some coaching and some executive leadership things as well. But that's really about coming alongside you as a business owner or a senior executive, and how do we make your business and your life a little bit lighter? And that's my amazing team. Okay, let's jump in and talk about the topic of the day. So, what are they predicting for a recession and why does it matter? So, why I love this chart is because it also shows, this is just the GDP over time, and it shows the little bumps in the road that we've experienced. So anybody who's been in business for since early 2000s or even in the 90s, some have experienced multiple recessions. Now let's just stop for a minute. What is a recession? So technically a recession is a decline in GDP for 2 quarters. So the reason that this is even a topic in 2022 is because in Q2, we had a decrease of 0.6% decrease in GDP. In Q2, that would be the April through June timeframe of the calendar. And so then we're like, oh my gosh, is this going to be a recession? What is going to look like? What is the next quarter going to be? And in Q3, we actually had an increase of 1.8% GDP. So doesn't qualify as a recession because it was only 1 quarter. So we were out of the case of a recession for 2022. Doesn't mean we don't need to be aware of the things going into 2023 and 2024. We're feeling this because of interest rates and some of the stuff that the media does. The one thing that I want to keep in mind is, what is our emotional stance doing and what is our logical stance doing when we think about a recession and how we react to it. So you're doing your due diligence here and having a conversation and listening to thoughts about the recession and preparing for it. So one, great, because now we're turning on our logical brain versus our emotional brain that's reacting to the media and the news who feeds off of fear. But what I want to do is educate you a little bit on the past recessions that we've had, and then how we can learn from those things to plan for the future. So a couple things that were notable. One was the .com bust, and why this one is important. So in early 2000, these aren't noted because this is a snip. In early 2000, at that time, the 5-year-old online bookseller named Amazon, what they did is they positioned themselves. They ended up selling $672 million worth of debt to better position themselves to go into the .com bust. So that happened in 2000. I was still actually in high school at that time, but I do remember that being thing on the news, is the .com bust that happened in year 2000. Now, the one that is more prevalent to us as business owners is right here in 2008, where we had the housing bubble that then burst. and had some really strong implications in 2008 and taking some time to recover from that. And then here in 2020, when we had COVID, we had then again another little dip in this. So what's fun to see about this and see the trend line? So you can see the trend line, and anytime there's a recession, it kind of drops below the trend line for a period of time. Remember, it's 2 quarters where GDP decreases, and GDP is basically just how much is the US producing versus consuming. That's really what that is. And in the bust in 2008, in that recession, that was caused by inflated home prices and some of those things that were going on in that. Now, when I talked to one of my business owners, he's like, but it's different this time because interest rates at that time were low. So in a lot of our, if you're in your 30s or 40s, or even in your 50s, we've lived in a really low interest rate market for the bulk of our career. So now interest rates are increasing for the first time, maybe the first time in our whole career. And that feels different. That feels like something we need to be aware of when we're making decisions. And it by all means is. I want to remind us, though, that back in 1980, interest rates were as high as 20%, and we still survived. So we still live today, 30, 40 years later, to talk about it. So it's not the end of the world. We just have to be strategic and want to do business a little bit differently than we would have if interest rates were still in the 3 to 5%. Now they're in the 7 to 9%, depending on what type of borrowing you're doing from a business perspective. So that's a difference between the 2008 bust recession and what we're looking at here. Obviously, 2020 was due to COVID, so we understand what was going on there. But what I want to point out here is why we're in this, what we're potentially calling a recession, is because of this hyperinflation that's going on in 2021. It doesn't say that that's hyperinflation, but it's a product of it because the prices increased significantly during that time frame. And what the federal government's tool is to control inflation is the interest rate. So when we have those interest rates rising, I'm not going to bore you with all the terms. I'm going to try and talk in layman's terms here. So the interest rates are rising because they want to slow inflation. So they increased interest rates here in 2022. They're going to continue to do that. They plan to continue to do that anyway into 2023, potentially as long as into Q1 of 2024. Now it's working. So if we went from a negative GDP in Q2 of 2022, and we as consumers reacted to that by slowing our spending, being more intentional with some of our cash reserves that we have, then we are already doing that. So it's so cool to see that we actually learned from some of the history and the things that cause those bigger recessions in the past, and that we can be more reactive. So it didn't take a dive in Q3 of 2022 because we already started behaving differently in that time frame. And I'll show you some consumer reports to reflect that as well. So there's a couple other points. No, I think I touched on all of them. Oh, so when the other thing with this prediction, so we have 2020 here too, which is still above 2023. The prediction is slightly below that trend line, but it's going to feel different. It's going to feel different than 2021. 2021 was hyperinflation. Like you could, there was so much work, so many things, the opportunities to go out there and make money in 2022 coming out of the pandemic. And that was really high. Now we're going to feel like it's not going to necessarily be a recession, but it's not going to grow as fast as it did from 2020 to 2021. So it'll feel different and won't feel, it might be like, is this what a recession feels like? And is it not? GDP wise, they're not predicting an actual recession, maybe quarter, but overall for the year, it's a 0.2% increase that they're predicting for 2023. So think of it more as level than an increase or a decrease. And that'll help with some of the emotional piece of that. So what does a recession mean for your small business? Oh, the another thing I wanted to share was this. I thought this was cool just because we're a part of it. So this livability has this recession proof cities. So Lincoln, Nebraska is #1. And then we're #3. Wichita, Kansas, Fargo, North Dakota, Victoria, Texas, Knoxville, Tennessee, Tulsa, Des Moines, back to Lincoln. What I wanted to point out on the map is basically we're all down the I29 corridor. Victoria, Texas isn't on I29 because it pops over here, but it's basically directly south of Fargo. So that's kind of neat. Besides Knoxville, Tennessee, which is over here, all of the cities that are based on this study, recession proof, are in the center of the United States. Why that is because we're more conservative fiscally. We don't have high swings and emotional reactions to a lot of things. We're take some time and be more thoughtful in those conversations. So I always think that's interesting to use those. So look at that. Why are we recession proof in that central part of the U.S. and why do people say that Fargo Moorhead has this bubble over it? Part of it is that we're fiscally conservative. We have North Dakota as kind of a special piece of it. So back in 2008, we were recession proof. It talked about it in that article, but I knew this before that. And why we didn't feel that recession as much is because we have Western North Dakota that had oil. So although the United States and the housing market changed a lot, we had the oil boom going on at the exact same time as the recession in 2008. So just tidbits. The recession back in the 80s when interest rates were in the 20%, that also was during an oil boom. So I tried to find like direct correlation, but it's just the timing of it that happened to be unique. And then I'd love to have more than 2 cases to argue that as well. So maybe we'll have some more when I'm in my 80s and gray hair that I can draw that direct correlation and talk about North Dakota being recession proof. But what does a recession really mean for your small business? Again, it's just a small decline in GDP. And depending on the business that you're in, how are you going to feel that and what's the impact that you're going to be? So those businesses that are more resilient or thrive in a recession are those that are like consumer products, discount retailers, those type of things. And the things that hurt a little bit more are more luxury goods. So if you're in the business of luxury goods or frivolous spending, then you might have to think about how do I either diversify my SKUs or how do I really manage my things. So the best things that you can do in a preparing for this recession is to just do best business practices. We so often get caught up working in the business that we don't take time to work on the business. So I would challenge you to think about in your next quarterly meeting or as you're preparing for setting goals for 2023, have this as part of your plan. So what are those things that people don't have to have? And what are those things that people would like to have? And how do I just be cognizant of that going into 2023? Okay, so this was a report, and this plays a little bit into why we didn't actually enter into a recession in 2022, is because we talked about it a lot and our consumer behavior changed almost immediately when we had quarter 2, with a decline in GDP. So this is what Americans say that they're going to do because of what the media is telling us is a pending recession or a possible recession. So declining or delaying purchasing a home or a car, paying down debt is another way to prepare for this, planning holiday spending. So if you are in the retail business and you're feeling some of that, just let us know. That's great data for us to have. allocating incomes into savings, so protecting cash and staying at the job even if they don't enjoy it. That'll help our retention numbers, but also we don't necessarily want to do have employees that don't enjoy their jobs either. So this was interesting data. I wanted to share that, especially because I have a couple realtors on, and I heard this last week with flipping the script of the interest rate from if you are going to buy, if it's in your life plan to be a buyer at this time, yes, interest rates are high and you might be able to negotiate a lower purchase price and you can buy down your interest rate. So if you have the cash to do it, let's think about that. So for your small business, these are the three things that are so important when entering a recession. Preserving cash. That's what we want to talk about, is preserving cash. What are the two things you can do to really preserve cash going into this? Cash is king. In a recession, out of a recession, it's even more so when we're entering in a potential downturn in our economy. Managing expenses. Of course, we shouldn't be doing this all the time, but in 2021, in 2021 was that high spike from coming out of 2020. We had PPP money, we had ERC money, we had all of this money that was thrown at us. The Bank of North Dakota had some opportunities to take advantage of as well. And so we probably, got a little looser on the purse strings and spent some money on things that maybe we didn't need to, but we had a bunch of cash. We were cash rich in 2021, given all the COVID dollars that were out there. Our clients alone, we got over $30 million for. So, and we're just little baby like consulting in Fargo, North Dakota. So I know that there was a ton of cash pumped into the system in 2021. So now we got to switch our mindset back to good fiscal management. And then the third thing is being proactive. So amping up your most productive lines. So if you have multiple product SKUs, what are the ones that are the most profitable? What are those? And then being strategic in the markets in which you're going after. And we need to be strategic for a few ways. So we're going to run through these quick as well. So how can your small business preserve cash? What does this look like? It looks like delaying spending. Now, you don't want to delay the point to where you're not taking advantage of inventory deals or those type of things, if that's a huge cost of yours, but you do want to preserve cash. And you can preserve cash in multiple ways. I want you to think about how quickly am I collecting my AR and being on top of that. If you've been delaying putting in a process to collect your AR faster, I would encourage you to push that initiative towards the forefront, putting some terms and conditions, getting people to pay more quickly, whether that's a discount if you pay within the first 10 days or whatever that looks like for your business. I would encourage you to gain as much cash as quickly as possible when it comes to that. So that's the AR side. On the AP side, thinking about how do I negotiate terms with those people that I owe money to? So whether it's your vendors and you get some freedom in there, so depending on their situation, they might give it to you or not. If they are also on this webinar, they're not, because they're going to say, hey, I can give you a 2% discount if you pay within 10 days. Sarah said so. But thinking about how do I pay my vendors solely, and managing debt is a huge part of it. So the bank is just merely a vendor. They're lending you cash, right? So if you have an opportunity to restructure your debt, we want to be thoughtful in this, because we don't want to give up our low 4% interest rate that we have locked in to have a higher interest rate at 7 or 8 in today's dollars just to do this. So we need to be super thoughtful. We don't want to create any other issues when we didn't think about the peripheral issues. But if you have a bank that's willing to go interest only for the next 6 months because you don't have a bunch of cash buildup, let's maybe push our banker a little bit and see if they would be willing to do that going into that. Now, banks have already retracted significantly for buildings specifically, what is the loan to value that they're going to tolerate? So we have people down all the way down to 55% loan to value, where they were at 80%, comfortably going to borrow you 80% of the value of the real estate that you're going to get into. And now that's changed in just 6 months. Interest rates too have changed a lot. But in your working capital and that debt, let's see if you can open up a line of credit, if you can increase some of that availability, just so that you have it just in case. So this is no different than Dave Ramsey's baby steps. When we think about our cash reserves should be 3 to 6 months of our operating expenses. And if we don't have that as cash in the bank, how do we create a mechanism to have that available at our disposal through lines of credit or through other means? So I want you to think about those two things when I think about preserving cash. Is what can I delay in spending? How do I get cash faster? And then with managing debt, how do I create capacity in that? Is it moving to interest only? Is it increasing my line of credit? The second one is managing expenses. So we had the free for all of all this COVID money that then caused hyperinflation in 2021. Now we're playing the other side of that, and we probably could do all the things. So now we can't, or we want to be prepared to be prepared. We're preparing to be prepared. But budgeting is one tool that sometimes we get away from, but it's really important to do that, to take the time, because now I can manage my cash better and manage my debt better because I know what the expectations are. So if you have a capital improvement project that you have earmarked for 2023, maybe depending on your cash position, you might want to rethink that. So if you don't have that 3 to 6 months of operating that's set aside, and everything above that then can be reinvested in the business in various ways with capital expenditures, you want to think about that. What does that do? How does it slow my business? And then the opportunities with preserving cash too can come along. So if you're thinking, I'm going to open up another manufacturing plant or expand my footprint, and thinking of how can I take advantage of those who are less prepared, not take advantage, that's not right. How do I take advantage of opportunities that might present themselves if somebody was less prepared than I am? So keeping that in mind. With the budget and sticking to it, you want to make sure that you know where you're going to be at and that you have the ability to do the things that you want to do, like pay your employees and continue to make your products or buy your products so that you can resell them. Those things are important. And without putting together a budget, it's going to be harder for that. So we're not a huge business. We have 8 employees, but we've gone through this process because we've had some inflation in our wages. And how do we have to change our fees or modify our fees, or how many more clients do we have to get to be able to support that increase in wages? And at what point does it make sense to add another person? And knowing that that wage that we could have added 2 years ago has now increased significantly, that's all information we need to know on the timing of these things. So just good fiscal practice is to set a budget, stick to it, manage it. One thing that we've talked about in the past is flexible budgeting. So what a flexible budget is, so say we can't predict exactly. I mean, the Forbes and all the thought leaders when it comes to economic situations have put their thoughts out there about where they think this recession is potentially going to lie. Like I said, it's basically going to be flat in 2023 and through Q1 of 2024 is what they're talking about right now. So if we plan to be flat as far as our expenses and our revenue, then we're probably safe. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't ramp it up, because in these times, we want to be able to say, what are our competitors doing and how do we do that better so that we can take advantage of, take some market share, right? So just because the market's not expanding doesn't mean you can't take more of the pie, if you will. But managing your budget and sticking to it is super important. The third thing is being proactive. So amping up your most productive things, your most profitable things is important. So when you look at, if you're manufacturing or you're in retail or anything that sells products or even services, think about which area am I getting the most bang for my buck and amp up those things so that you have to be thoughtful. So if luxury cars is my most profitable business line that I have, and knowing that in a recession, luxury sales go down, maybe that's not the one I want to put my eggs in, but maybe I want to be strategic. That's what be strategic means, in what it is that we're investing in a business. So when you talk about amping up those most productive things, whether that's products or services, let's do that. Let's be intentional. Let's budget that way. Let's think about, what does 2023 look like? What are people going to behave like? What are they going to do? What are they going to want? And then really beef up those things and being strategic in that. So this isn't like rocket science here when it comes to preparing for a recession. We talked about that it's not going to be this big, huge dip that that the media would like to scare you into. They did an effective job of scaring us and shifting Q3 in 2022, shifting our spending habits. But from a business perspective, it's just doing the things that we were taught to do. But because we've been hyper reactive since COVID, it is a great time to slow down, to reset, and to be more strategic going forward into 2023. So that's what I have to chat about on recession. I didn't want to take a full hour. As I did more and more research leading up to this conversation, it was pretty clear that this isn't a doom and gloom. I don't want you to think that you have to sell your business tomorrow and be ready and hoard your cash, put it all under the cushions of your bed and all the things, because that's not really what it's going to be like. We as intelligent business people have done the things already, and as consumers, we've dialed back the spending a little bit, and we are ready to move forward into potentially not a recession at all. So that's pretty cool that we get to learn from our mistakes already, or from our past opportunities to learn. There's just opportunities all over the place. So I just want to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions about past recessions, or my thoughts on preparing for the recession, or anything like that. Who has the first question?
I'm jumping in, Sarah. This is Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
I loved the slide that you had with Fargo, North Dakota. So if there's a way to share that, I would love to have that. And I think that all of us have to appreciate that. I'm in real estate, so you mentioned that earlier. Ups and downs don't happen here. And I'm guessing in a lot of businesses, they don't happen here like they do in other parts of the country. And that's what the average consumer is getting bombarded with on the news every day.
Yeah. Yes. So the things that we feel here, we're just like, let's say Arizona or California or New York, they're feeling these, or Florida feels that, and where we feel this. So it's different. And because we've had such a booming real estate market over the last 15, 20 years, you would be a better expert on what that looks like. Even a slowdown might feel like that word recession, but it's just a slowdown. And it's okay to be more intentional and slow. So we're pretty lucky. That's why we put up with the cold like today and yesterday. But if you're more of a national company and you're doing work throughout the country, just being cognizant of those people who are more reactive to some of these changes. Who has the next question? Lindsay did text me and she said she's disappointed Browerville isn't there. I think you're close enough to that I-29 corridor that we can count you in as to close to recession proof, the heart of America, and providing us with our consumer goods in farming is also valuable. So that's great. A question that go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I was just thinking, I don't know how to phrase this, but for interest, that's one of the areas that we're really getting squeezed on is our interest rate. You know, our line was below 2%. Now we're sitting at 6, almost 6.5. We're renegotiating our line and just paying down more of that debt. And we've had a lot of capital expenditures and a couple acquisitions. So that's kind of increased our debt a lot in the last 2 years. So just what's the best approach to take for paying down debt quickly so we can reduce the amount of interest we're paying. So it's almost, I was just figuring it out on our line of credit, it's almost $2 million extra in a year. So it's a big number. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The interest rates are affecting it significantly. So I would challenge, being you're a North Dakota based business, I would challenge your bank to think very differently. How does the Bank of North Dakota participate? Is there different debt out there more at a national level, or even things that they don't, because they're in business too. So they want to be the ones that are borrowing you money, which might limit their thinking. And is there opportunity outside of so North Dakota has this gift called the Bank of North Dakota, and I know you guys have taken advantage of that in a couple different situations. So if you other people who are on the call have not done that, make sure that your banker and that you're pushing them to look at that. So the Bank of North Dakota is one option. In thinking of what are other debt structures that could infuse cash and really reduce that. And then with a give and take and privately held, it's what am I willing to give up to not pay that extra 2% of interest in that? Because if you're smaller, I know your particular case, but if you're smaller, is it ownership shares with somebody who has cash that's only getting XYZ% at the bank or in the market, and this is a safer where they can exponentially sell their business, or in a big business like yours, changing some of the debt structure. We can go into a bunch of different thoughts and options on that, whether it's having the employees buy it and looking at an ESOP and some of those things to kind of infuse cash in the organization. Those are the things that I would challenge at that. You have a much bigger business, so it's bigger scale. Is Bank of North Dakota pushing back on the bank on what are their margins? Like I'm not picking on banks here. I don't think there's any bankers on here, but when it comes to the beauty of their buildings and the extravagancy of their Christmas parties, I think there's probably a little bit of room to wiggle there. When it comes to interest rates, I know that they got to make money and they got to have their cultures that they want to. So not saying that, but I'm just saying there's wiggle room there. So we got to be more push back on them a little bit on what do you actually need to have and how do we make this a win-win for both businesses.
Right. The other thing too is it a good time to sell real estate to pay down debt?
Mm-hmm. So if you have unused stuff, and Joel can probably speak to the real estate market. So depending on the type of real estate, there hasn't been a huge decline in the, so right now in Fargo-Moorhead, for instance, office space is in, there's more supply than there is demand for it. So but still people are still buying and buying because if you're a business that's choosing, I'm going to pay rent or own, it's still more advantageous to own than it is to pay rent. So there's some opportunity there when it comes to land. So I know this because I've been in the real estate market for I don't know, 15 years on producing land. So land that's just sitting there and it's not income producing because you're either using it for your facilities or it doesn't have a rental property on it. I know it feels like it's great because I can hold it for 10 years and double my money, but you can put that money into your business and double it next year. So
right. That's exactly what my brain's telling me too, is
yeah.
If there's a location, we can sell off some of the, locations that aren't as profitable and reinvest that to pay down debt, we'd be money ahead in the long run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So using all of your resources to the best of their ability and thinking outside of ordinary is great.
Thank you.
Yes. How about the next question? Okay, hearing no other questions, I just want to thank you for taking your time to spend with us. I want you guys to pause, think strategically. That's the best way to prepare for a recession, is to work on the business and don't get caught up in the business. Be prepared, preserve cash, manage your expenses. Being proactive and strategic are the three things you need to keep in mind. Don't let the media scare you too much. Don't make emotional decisions, make logical ones, and you'll be really equipped to enter into 2023 if a recession does hit. So that's what we wanted to share with you today. If you have any other additional questions, feel free to reach out to me or Drew, and we will do our very best to answer them or point you to a person who can. Thanks for tuning in.